The cat kept touching the baby's face. Then something changed. Everyone told her to keep the cat away from the newborn. She almost listened. What happened next left doctors without a clear explanation, and a family forever changed. A story about instinct, love, and the silent language between species. It happened every single night. The moment the house went quiet and the last light clicked off, a small gray shape would slip through the bedroom door, leap onto the edge of the crib, and press one soft paw ever so gently against the baby's cheek. Not once, not twice, every single night, and no one could explain why. Sarah Mitchell had not slept a full night in 11 weeks. She was the kind of tired that settles into your bones, the kind that makes the edges of the world look slightly blurred, as if your eyes are struggling to agree with reality. She had a newborn, she had a husband who worked night shifts, and she had Milo, a 7-year-old smoke gray tabby who had been the center of her universe before the baby arrived, and who had since then developed a habit that terrified her every time she witnessed it. He touched the baby's face. Not aggressively, not curiously the way cats bat at shiny objects. He would approach the crib with a deliberateness that seemed almost too measured for an animal, sit beside it for a long moment as if collecting himself, and then, very slowly, very carefully, reach through the wooden slats and lay his paw on little Ella's cheek, sometimes on her forehead, sometimes just under her nose. And then he would stay there, still, watching. Context: a cat, a crib, and a mother on edge. Sarah had read every article the internet had to offer on the subject of cats and newborns. The warnings were everywhere, delivered in tones ranging from gentle to apocalyptic. Cats carry bacteria, cats are jealous, cats have been known to curl up on babies' faces, drawn by the warmth and the smell of milk. Pediatricians advised keeping nursery doors closed. Friends advised rehoming the pet entirely. Her mother-in-law, with the authority of someone who had raised 4 children in an era before parenting blogs, simply said, "Get rid of the cat." Sarah did not get rid of the cat. She wasn't sure she could have, even if she had wanted to. Milo had been with her through a cross-country move, a miscarriage, a difficult pregnancy, and long nights when her husband's shifts left her alone in a house that felt too large and too quiet. He had slept on her feet and on her chest. He had sat on her lap during every ultrasound appointment she watched from her laptop. He had been, in the most honest sense of the word, her companion. Still, she was a mother now, and the behavior unnerved her in ways she could not entirely articulate. It wasn't that Milo seemed threatening. It was that he seemed purposeful, intentional, as if he knew something she did not. She began setting up her phone to record the nursery at night, partly because she felt she needed proof, for herself as much as for anyone else, of what was actually happening in that room while she tried to sleep. What she captured over the following 3 weeks would eventually find its way to her veterinarian, her pediatrician, a behaviorist, and in time to thousands of strangers on the internet who would debate its meaning with the fervor usually reserved for things that resist simple explanation. He wasn't pawing at her, he was checking on her with a patience and consistency no exhausted human parent could have sustained alone. Rising tension, the nights that changed everything. The footage was difficult to dismiss. Night after night, at intervals between 90 minutes and 2 hours, Milo would enter the nursery. Sarah had stopped closing the door after the 3rd week, a decision she would later describe as something I still don't know how to explain rationally. Cross the room with quiet, deliberate steps and stand at the side of the crib. Then the paw, always the paw, always the face, always that long, unblinking watch. What made the footage genuinely strange was the timing. On several occasions, Milo's visits coincided with moments when Ella's breathing had become irregular, the shallow, uneven breath of a baby in a deep sleep cycle, the kind pediatricians refer to when discussing the mechanisms of infant respiration. When Milo touched her cheek, Ella would stir. Her breathing would shift. She would not always wake fully, but the pattern would reset, deepen, stabilize, and Milo would withdraw, just as quietly as he had arrived, and disappear back through the door. Sarah showed the videos to her pediatrician at Ella's 12-week check. Dr. Renata Chavez watched them twice, said nothing for a moment, and then said, "I don't want to make a claim I can't substantiate, but I think you should keep watching this." She also ordered a precautionary pulse oximetry test, a painless overnight monitor that measures oxygen levels in the blood to establish Ella's baseline respiration data. The results came back within normal range. Ella was healthy, but Dr. Chavez had noticed something in the video that Sarah herself had been too sleep-deprived to register consciously. Milo consistently placed his paw directly beneath Ella's nostrils, not her cheek, not her forehead, beneath her nose, precisely where he would feel the warmth and movement of her breath against the pads of his paw. He wasn't touching her face. He was checking whether she was breathing.
Before you read on, does this story move you? Share it with someone who has ever loved an animal or been loved by one. These moments deserve to travel further than a single scroll. Share this story. Revelation: what science says and what it cannot say. The idea that domestic cats can detect changes in human physiology is not new, nor is it entirely without scientific grounding. Cats possess a sensory apparatus that is, in several measurable ways, dramatically more acute than our own. Their hearing extends into frequency ranges beyond human perception. Their sense of smell is estimated to be between 9 and 16 times more powerful than ours, with a second olfactory organ, the vomeronasal organ, or Jacobson's organ, that processes chemical signals the human nose cannot register at all. Their sensitivity to minute changes in air movement, temperature, and vibration, channeled through their whiskers and the nerve endings in their paw pads, gives them a kind of tactile awareness that borders on something we might call preternatural if we weren't committed to the language of biology. There are well-documented cases of cats alerting their owners to undiagnosed medical conditions. There are cats trained and cats untrained that have detected the onset of epileptic seizures minutes before they occur. There are accounts of cats behaving with unusual attentiveness around cancer patients, around individuals experiencing hypoglycemic episodes, around people in the early, silent stages of cardiac events. The mechanisms are not fully understood. The research is still catching up to the anecdotes, but the anecdotes are consistent enough and numerous enough that dismissing them entirely requires a willful suspension of open-mindedness. Dr. Mikel Delgado, a certified cat behaviorist and researcher affiliated with the University of California, has written about the ways in which cats' social behavior toward humans is more sophisticated than the popular narrative of feline aloofness would suggest. Cats, she argues, are not indifferent. They are selective. They observe, they calibrate, and they form attachments to specific people in specific contexts that can produce behaviors that look, from the outside, remarkably like what we would call devotion. Whether Milo understood, in any cognitive sense, what he was doing when he pressed his paw beneath Ella's nose, whether there was intention, concern, love in any form we would recognize, is a question that cannot be answered with current tools. What can be said is that he did it, consistently, reliably, for weeks, with a patience and a precision that would have been remarkable in any creature, and that in a cat, raised on a story told by a tired mother with a phone propped on a dresser at 2 in the morning, felt like something close to extraordinary. Sarah eventually did close the nursery door, not to keep Milo out, but at the recommendation of her pediatrician, who wanted her to establish a consistent sleep environment for Ella as she moved out of the newborn stage. The night she closed the door for the first time, she lay awake for an hour listening to Milo scratch softly at the wood. She opened it. He went directly to the crib. She watched him for a long time in the dark. Then she went back to bed. Emotion. Final. What we choose to call it. Ella is 3 years old now. She walks with the specific confidence of a child who has never been asked to be smaller than she is, and she calls Milo my cat, with a proprietary certainty that Milo, for his part, appears to accept completely. He sleeps at the foot of her bed. He tolerates the indignities of toddler affection, the grabbing, the enthusiastic kissing, and the periodic insistence that he wear a doll's hat, with a patience that Sarah recognizes as the same patience he showed at the crib, in the dark, in the small hours of the morning, when the rest of the world was somewhere else. She has been asked many times how she thinks about what happened, whether she believes Milo was really checking on the baby, whether she thinks animals are capable of that kind of awareness, whether she has a name for what she witnessed. Her answer is always the same, and it is not really an answer at all, because some things resist being answered. I know what I saw, and I know what it felt like to see it. There is a version of this story in which Milo was simply a curious cat attracted to the warm, milk-scented creature that had displaced him as the center of the household. There is a version in which the timing was coincidence. The breathing was already stabilizing on its own, and Sarah's sleep-deprived brain was finding patterns in noise, the way all human brains are wired to do. These versions may even be correct. But there is another version, one that sits in the part of us that is always known, even before we had language for it, that the animals who live with us, who read our moods and memorize our rhythms and find us in the dark, may understand something about love. Not our word for it, not our shape of it, but something that points in the same direction. Milo will be 11 this spring. He moves a little more slowly now. His muzzle has gone white at the edges. But on the nights when Ella is restless, when a nightmare moves through her sleep and her breathing shortens and shifts, a small gray shape still finds its way through the dark and settles without a sound at the edge of her bed, watching, waiting, present. End. That the animals who live beside us may understand something about love, not our word for it, not our shape of it, but something that points in the same direction. If this story stayed with you, every animal has a story worth telling. Share this with someone who has ever been watched over by a person or by a cat who never asked for credit.